it for myself. Walked beaches and out desert sands and gazed out from her shelf. Sailed our sheltered waters and cruised the open sea. Climbed our wild escarpments from Kakadu to the Daintree. And where our heart lives is where our mind roams, when memories wander through our native home. Life's ever changing, just ask one who knows, 'cause where our heart lives is where our mind goes. I've lived summer in the tropics and winters of the south, from grand coastal ranges to rivers at their mouth, from the inland seas and craters to the reef and Great Divide, and where ports and bays and beaches caress the ebbing tide. And where our heart lives is where our mind roams, when memories wander through our native home. Life's ever changing, just ask one who knows, 'cause where our heart lives is where our mind goes. You're tuned into The Shaza Leigh Show, produced by the LBS Music Group and recorded at LBS Music Land in Tamworth, Australia's country music capital. We thank today's sponsors, Oz Radio Gold, DLX Detailing and Shot by Lock Photography. We'd like to welcome Lindsay Butler today as our very first guest of the Shaza Leigh Show, episode 1. So Lindsay, your guitar playing has been the most significant part of your career, and I know it's your first love, even though you wear many hats within the Australian country music industry. We would like to talk to you about your guitar playing today and how important it is to you. So where did it all start for Lindsay Butler?
It's a long story, Shaz, and I'm going to have to go back a few years to get this one working out. Anyway, yeah, I was a baby of a family of 4, 2 sisters and brother, and both my sisters actually played and sang country music, and my mum was an accordion player, used to play the accordion, and Dad he used to play the old button accordion, and he loved the bush. And so I think when I was very young, probably around about 3 or 4 year old, we went to live in a place called Gilgary, way down the other side of Sandy Hills, which is down the other side of Tenterfield, between Tenterfield and Casino. And we were about 70 k's out of Tenterfield, our nearest town. No car, all we had was a horse and sulky, and we didn't have much in the way of no television back in those days, of course. We had a little old wind-up gramophone and a rough old wireless, and that was our entertainment. We used to listen to the country music shows from Lismore. That was the only station we could pick up on a good night, I might say. And so that basically meant that our main thing, entertainment, was listening to country music and the old 78 records. That's how, I guess, when you think about it, people like Buddy Williams and Dusty and Tex Morton and a few other American singers at the time actually become our childhood heroes.
Out of all the instruments that were available to you, because all your members of your family played different instruments, what made you choose guitar out of every other instrument?
I'm not sure. I guess my sister, she was the first one to buy a guitar in the family, and she was having lessons in Tenterfield whenever she could. And she was also responsible for teaching me my first chords on the guitar when I was about 9-year-old, I think. And that's Aileen. And of course, she also was the one that taught me correspondence. We didn't have a school close enough to go to. And, she taught me just about everything I know, as far as that's concerned. As far as the guitar thing was concerned, I think I started listening to guitar players that played for probably Ernest Tubb, guitar player. His name was Billy Bird, remember him? And just little things like that made me interested enough to get serious. And when we moved a little closer to Tenterfield eventually, on the dairy farm, and I started getting pretty serious about the guitar, learning it better. Used to go and watch the only guitar players back in those days you could listen to. There was only about 2 or 3 that you could listen to, and the only time you could listen to them was when they come around with a travelling show. And I certainly referred to Barry Thornton, the Slim, and Paul Lester, who used to travel with Rick and Thel. And yeah, I used to love going to watch them fellas play and learn a little bit more all the time. And one of the first guitar players that I ever saw, he was probably the first electric guitar player I saw at our local show in Tenterfield. He was in a group called the Maori Troubadours. And he used to play this little instrumental called, I think it was Woody Woodpecker. And we got pretty amazed, so we spent the next 2 or 3, me and my mates, other guitar players, trying to learn. We spent about 2 months trying to learn this little Woody Woodpecker thing that the Maori, I still don't know what his name was, And that was my first thing with an electric guitar, actually.
Back in the day, most artists had their first exposure on touring shows. Like, they were given the opportunity to jump up on shows and actually present themselves. That was really the only opportunity that they had to show that they could perform. What were some of the shows that actually embraced your guitar playing and gave you those early opportunities?
Well, in my early teens, I wanted to be a singer. Guitar playing was second, and I wanted to be next Hank Williams come along. Because I think in about 1952, Hank Williams appeared on the scene, and I fell in love with his music. And in some ways, I think his singing and his writing had a big effect on my guitar playing, and still does. More so than in listening to other guitar players.
Which were some of the shows that actually put you up on their show as they were travelling through Tenterfield?
Rick and Thel Carey used to always give me a spot as a singer. I'd get up and sing a few songs. Every time they come to town, never knocked me back. Res Lindsay was another one that always asked me if I wanted to get up and sing a few songs, which I did. The old School of Arts in Tenterfield. And the other one was Athol McCoy. And through doing a thing with Athol there one time, Tenterfield was what got me my first tour.
I wanted to talk to you about Athol because I had the opportunity to meet him, and he was such a character. He was one of the true showmen of his day. To get that phone call from Athol and be given the opportunity to tour with him, that must have been just massive when you were a child coming from Tenterfield. Absolutely.
It wasn't a phone call, it was a little telegram back in those days.
Oh, wow, okay. All right, we all get phone calls.
Little telegram, are you interested in touring with the Athol McCoy Show? It was actually called The Real McCoy Show. And if I was, to meet up with him over in Moree to have a listen to what I was doing. And so me and my first wife, we took a drive over to Moree to have an audition thing with Athol. And I thought I've got to try and impress him a little bit, so I played an old tune called Just Because. and I did it 3 times faster than I normally did. And Athol had to be the rhythm player for me, and he said, geez, you're playing fast. I said, that's normally what I do, Athol, is that all right? And he said, yeah, well, I think I've got a name for you, I'm going to call you Speedy Butler.
I know that, and he called you Speedy right to the very end. I thought it was the fact that you travelled so slow, like you never did anything fast.
All the guitar playing. And I ended up being dubbed that up in the Northern Territory with all the Aboriginal people I know.
How long did you tour with Athol?
Only one tour, 1 year. About 6 months. It was only going to be a 4-month tour, I think, and it ended up being 6 months. And, we struck some terrible weather, floods and driving through mud and slush and running out of food and all that sort of stuff up at the top end of Western Australia. And got down to the bottom end of the west and it poured down again, so Athol had to eventually cancel the tour.
Athol loved you. There was a really close connection between the two of you, and I was privy to that. He talked about a situation where you actually saved his life, and I'd like you to just tell that story today.
Yeah, I did. Oh, okay, that's a few years ago now, it's a bit vague, but it was up in the top end of Western Australia. We were stuck out in the floods, and I drove my old car through first to see if it was going to be. I got through okay, and then Athol decided to tow his caravan through the water. It was a creek, and he got bogged. He actually got stopped right in the middle of the creek, and he said, "Oh, can you get up the road there? And there's a grader working on the road. You might be able to come down and pull me out." So we went up to the grader man, and he came down. We got back down to Athol's car. Both Athol and Eileen were unconscious in the front of the car. They'd left the car running in the water. The exhaust pipe was underneath the water, and of course they got gassed. And it was lucky there were some other people there that were waiting for the creek to go down, and one of them was a nurse. And she brought them around, just got them out of the car and brought them around again. And yeah, that was a pretty close, probably a couple more minutes they would have been gone.
And he used to say that they were croc-infested waters, and yet you just had no mind for yourself and just went and saved them both. And I know that the man was still, many years later, it's still so passionate about the fact that you did that for them, and that connection never went. It was there right till the end.
Yeah, well, I wanted to be pretty sure that we could save them. You know, it was a frightening experience, there's no doubt about that. I had to actually, that night, I had to sleep in the caravan with Athol and Eileen to make sure that they didn't have a relapse on it again. And he often used to say, "It saved me life not only for one day, but for one night." But
well, he was a funny man. I loved him to pieces, and I know he loved you too. It was very special. You then had the opportunity to tour with Buddy Williams, and I'd like to fast forward to that time. Buddy was such a significant and prominent artist at the time. To get the opportunity to tour with the Buddy Williams show and travel right around Australia must have been a magnificent opportunity in that day.
I think it was 1969 or 70 when I did my first tour with Buddy. Travelled down to Sydney after he rang me up and asked me if I wanted to do a tour, and went down to Sydney and went out to Liverpool to the caravan park out there where he was camped. And about 2 or 3 o'clock, Buddy comes over to the caravan to say hello, and just walks in and talked to me for a little while, and then he picks up an old guitar that was lying on the back bed of the caravan, and he said, "Play me Guitar Boogie." So once again I thought, to impress, I'll play Guitar Boogie 3 times faster than I usually did. And he didn't say anything, he just said no, and sort of nodded his head and then walked out, and that was it. And that was my first interview and first thing with Buddy Williams and the Buddy Williams show. And I had 3 years with Buddy.
During that time, you had the opportunity to tour to the remotest areas of Australia and regional Australian towns, plus the cities. Coming from Tenterfield, that must have just been an amazing experience to be all of a sudden touring around Australia.
Yeah, well, I was a bit of a local hero there then, in Tenterfield, because I was actually touring with Buddy Williams, you know, and it was a fantastic experience. You couldn't work with anyone better than Buddy Williams to learn the ropes. And Buddy was really great too. He'd spend many hours telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and just advising you about the industry in general. And he certainly knew a lot about it.
And being on a travelling road show is very different to just performing as part of a band. You truly become part of that family, and you're expected to do way more than just perform on stage at night.
Absolutely, yeah. On your day off, you used to wash caravans, cars, put bearings in the wheels if you had to. You never had a day off, really.
So he must have been the mechanic?
You know, the first week we both, me and the mate with us with the show, we thought, you know, geez, we're big time now, we're professional musicians. And on our first day off, we had to go and wash the caravans with the cars. We soon learned that that's the way it was on the road. And
absolutely.
It didn't hurt me, I can assure you.
And being the amazing showman that he was, I know how important it was to him to have all his rigs looking pristine as he drove into town. You guys would have had to have been a huge part of that entire image, not just performing on stage.
Absolutely. Like, Buddy never wanted to drive into the town anywhere unless all the gear, the cars and the caravans looked nice and clean, and people took notice of that. You know, he was very fussy about that, and that's why sometimes on the road now I like to wash the bus.
The ultimate showman he was of the day, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that was an enormous thing for me to think that I could go and play guitar for one of my heroes. Absolutely.
When you started playing guitar as a child in Tenterfield, did you ever envisage or have that inner passion to become the greatest guitar player of your generation and perform with all these heroes of yours? Did you ever foresee that as being a possibility as a child?
No, I never dreamt of it, no, definitely not. No.
So each stage of your career was an exciting stage.
Yep, and you know, you learn a little bit with every tour you do. And as I said, I was with Buddy for 3 years, and remained great friends with Buddy over the years, and ended up doing an album of his songs, recorded an album of his songs as instrumentals. And I took it up to him. He was actually seriously ill in Greenslopes Hospital in Brisbane, and I took up the master and the cover and everything to show, and he shook my hand and said, "Look, I'm so proud." And yeah,
fantastic. You became a very good friend of the entire Williams family, and I know that for a fact. The time that you spent as part of their family touring with them has carried through to today. When you left that family and had the opportunity to tour with Slim Dusty, that must have just been quite mind-blowing, knowing that his show was probably the premier country music show on the road in that period. It must have been amazing to get to work with the king of country music.
Absolutely. I'd moved, after Buddy's tours, I'd moved from Tenterfield down to Tamworth. I decided to come down and get into the country music recording and all that sort of thing. So times were pretty tough, and I had to get a job at the same time. And ended up in the council doing some work with shovel and pick. Sometimes when it was easy.
You clocked on and clocked off anyway.
And anyway, one day I got a message from an old friend of mine, Ross Murphy, who said, Slim Dusty wants to talk to you about possibly getting you to play guitar for him. Well, I can tell you right now, I was at work with a pick and shovel. I threw them both down straight away and went down to the telephone, rang Slim up, and he said, "Yeah, I'll be in Tamworth tomorrow. I want to meet you if I can." I'd only ever met Slim once before, and that was when I was on tour with Buddy. And so next day I met him at the Travel Lodge in Tamworth, both Slim and Joey. And he didn't request any guitar playing or anything, he just gave me the job in the next tour. And that was my first tour with Slim. And I've got to say, that was an association that lasted for many, many years. Even after I wasn't touring with him, I still recorded with him whenever I could. And I got the greatest admiration for Slim and Joy. They were really good to me.
Yeah. Touring with Slim would have been very different to touring with those original Outback shows. And the Outback shows really did travel to the remotest areas. Touring with Slim would have been, he performed much more in the city and the bigger venues, some of the massive venues you had the opportunity to perform in. How did it differ being part of that major production rather than just the Outback touring shows as such?
Well, my first tour with Slim, we were still using caravans, and that went out through Western Queensland and places like that. But then it eventually got into much flashy stuff, like staying in motels and flying around in aeroplanes and all that sort of thing. And recording in, well, I was living in Tamworth most of the time, and he'd bring me up if he wanted me to go down to a session, and he'd send me, he'd get on the phone, he'd get on the phone and ring me up, and I had an old CD player that recorded as well. So he'd sing the song on the telephone, and I'd put it on the CD, and that's how I used to learn the songs. Go down and put them down, and usually Slim liked to do a lot of his stuff with first hit, you know.
So his musicians were expected to do their homework before they arrived.
Absolutely.
So he really was the ultimate professional, wasn't he? Like in every way, he expected himself to deliver perfection, and he expected that of those around him.
Yep, absolutely. He was a very good muso. You know, like a lot of people used to know, Slim's only a rhythm guitar player, but he could do that very, very well, and he certainly he didn't miss anything.
We all grew up in an era where perfection was expected on stage, and you were expected to be a professional performer in every way. The way that entertainers perform these days is much more relaxed, it's much more casual, and for our generation it feels as though there's not quite the same level of professionalism. Do you feel that, Lindsay?
Pretty much so, yeah. A lot of it's sort of changed a fair bit, I think. And times have changed too, of course. I mean, sound systems are much better now, and people get fussy with their sound and all that sort of thing. Back in Buddies, there was two speakers out the front, two tiny little speakers out the front. And it's interesting to note the musos that backed Buddy always did it behind the stage. Rick and Thel's musos used to always sit behind the stage. I remember Paul Leslie used to sit behind the stage, have a beer whenever he could, and so you couldn't see the artist at the time. You could hear them singing on stage without no monitors. There was no such thing as a monitor. It changed when I got with Slim. You know, he had sort of different ideas, and musos used to go on stage and play. But that was funny, that's the way it was. I think it was a lot to do with keeping the emphasis on the entertainers, you know, and the musos were only there for the music.
And performing used to be short, sharp, everything was done quite dynamically. There was no meandering onto stage and plugging your guitar in and then just walking up and talking to someone. Like, everything was very professional.
Oh, well, I like things to be right too, you know.
I know you do. We both do.
So do you.
I've worked with you for over 25 years, so I know that our show commands that sort of professionalism. I also know that a lot of people don't like to work under those strict guidelines.
No.
So I wanted to know whether it was still as important to you today as what it was back then, and that's how you were taught to perform.
I guess it didn't do us any harm. It teaches you to be as good as you can be.
Absolutely.
And that's something you've got to do for your fans, because they're the ones that pay the money.
Well, Lindsay Butler, you certainly have become all you could be, and you certainly have become as good as you possibly could be. You're a legend in the Australian country music industry, and we thank you for your years of service. And I personally appreciate the fact that you're a great man as well. As my husband, I love you heaps. Congratulations, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Shaz. Been a pleasure, always a pleasure working with you.